It's time to take a peek into the ranks of the future. Welcome back to Cocky Gachas, and in this video we are going to be discussing and analyzing China tier list, because you guys always say, right, what do you know if you don't play China server? So this time we're going to analyze a China tier list to see what the China players actually think. And this tier list is a full 1.4 tier list, which means it includes the new characters 37 as well as 6, and it is created by Bilibili creator up to Bao Mihua. So all the credits go to him for creating this tier list, and the reason why I picked this tier list in particular is because I reviewed the rest of his work to see that he understands the game, right? Because a lot of times a lot of creators just love to create stuff but they don't actually understand the game. So I really review and think that this is a worthy tier list for us to review and analyze. And of course, disclaimer as usual, all tier lists are subjective, including this one. So created by him, I also have my disagreements with some of his placement. Now with that out of the way, let's dive straight in. For this tier list, there are going to be 5 tiers going to tier 0. So we're going to start with tier 4 first, and of course at the bottom of the tier list we have New Babel. Honestly, the fact that New Babel is able to come into tier 4 is already quite good, right? We shouldn't be expecting too much. In most circumstances in previous patches, we wouldn't see New Babel so close to other 6-star units, but for this patch especially, I think New Babel can excel a bit as a teammate for 37 for the raids. And also there's a new side cube which allows for counter users, especially 37 and New Babel, to really excel. So that is why New Babel comes in at the bottom of the tier list, barely squeezed in, but even then you wouldn't want to use her that much, so she's relatively niche with her counters, not as strong as 37 for sure. Now moving on, we have Leah, and for a lot of global players to see her beside New Babel might be a shock and call this tier list trash, but honestly I think it's not too far from the truth. At most I can move her up a few ranks above Sotheby, maybe Eternity, but really can't move her up that much. And the reason is because the moment 2 Fairy dropped into the game, she has already lost her edge with being capped at 100% crit rate. Meanwhile, all of the other users, right, like if you build A Knight with crit, you can reach 40%, and then with 2 Fairy with the passive as well as the debuff, you can reach 80% crit. So her advantage in being able to crit to deal extra damage is already lost. She has pretty much been downgraded to a support for 37, and even then it's not as good as a support like Pickles for 37. So really Leah has no spot in the current meta game. But of course, like China players say, right, 一代版本一代神. So what this means is that every patch have their own gods. Maybe next patch Leah will have a time to shine, but as of now, if there is no major rework, I might not see that happening. No crit overflow really hurts her a lot, especially when a lot of other units already have crit overflow. So next is going to be Sotheby. Sotheby is relatively low rank because of her delayed heal, and also Cure cannot crit. So this is one of the problems with Sotheby, but of course if you were to include her in a Changling team, she can sort of excel, and also she isn't the worst with I3. I personally think that she's fine here, but judging from the other units, right, it might be right to put her in this tier at one of the worst units probably. Next is going to be Eternity, our god when come global launch, but now has been degraded to one of the worst units comparatively, of course. And the reason is because there is not much use for her anymore. Her damage is really weak compared to other multipliers, users with higher multipliers, and also the need for her to solo is no longer there. Everyone have a build box, so don't need to solo. There is no real need for you to level her if you were to start the game right now compared to the other options. If you want single target, you can go for Black Dwarf. Black Dwarf isn't even that bad at AoE damage at all. So even if you look at her from a main carry perspective, you might not even want to invest in Eternity if you were to start the game right now in 1.4. And especially for boss rates, she really has no place there. So this is why she is that low in rank. Next, moving on, we have Medicine Pocket. And honestly, this is something that I do not agree with. I think Medicine Pocket should at least be on tier 3. But I think the reasoning over here for her to be in tier 4 is because people don't really use Medicine Pocket when they have 2 Fairy, since 2 Fairy can fit in every single team. And also the fact that Medicine Pocket's debuff for the damage taken is only 1 round, right? If you know how the calculation works, if you only have a 1 round damage taken, right, you pretty much only use it when you don't have 3 of your carries cards. If you have 3 of your carry cards and you do not have enough Muxi to get ultimate, right, then you definitely want to use the 3 cards both to boost Muxi as well as to also enjoy higher damage compared to the damage taken plus 2 other attacking cards, which is lower damage. So this is where her problem lies. And also her I3 is really unflattering. Below 50% extra healing done is not really that good, to be honest, which is why I think she is in tier 4. Now moving up to tier 3, we are going to have a couple 5-star units, but 2 of those are at full portraits. Necrologist in full portraits is really quite used in the current 1.4 meta, whereby there is a need for the damage buff so that you can achieve SSS rank if you do not have Pickles. So really straight up as a Pickles alternative when you think about it. And at Portrait 5 there is damage bonus or damage buff to the whole team for 50% extra damage each, so 150% total, right, if you consider that, except for herself. And also the prayer can be useful because boss rates are especially difficult, and also for some scenarios her dispel can also come in clutch. Of course for Pickles, definitely Pickles is going to be higher rated since Pickles is less AP greedy, but Necrologist shouldn't be something that people overlook, so even better than some of the 6 stars as you can see. Now next we have Charlie full portraits, and for me this is not a surprise at all. In fact, I think that she can go up to the middle of tier 3, and the reason is because she does more damage than Leah at full portraits, and also she does not have the problem of the crit overflowing, so she's a legit carry instead of a support like Leah. And also I did see a lot of SSS rate clears with her as a main carry as well, so this is where she really excels from a damage end. The only problem is she's kind of frail, so at full portraits, even though her damage is really good, her survivability is kind of concerning, which is why she's not higher in the tier, I do believe. Next is going to be Beacon, and Beacon without portraits is being rated kind of low over here. I do think that judging from the ratings itself, right, this might be a bit too low for Beacon. Personally, I think that she would be nearer to Centurion, but regardless, Beacon is definitely good. At 0 portraits though, her damage isn't the highest. This is the main concern, right? You're using her more for the debuff, and also the fact that now the difficulty spikes up, you do need more damage. And in the current meta whereby the plant type isn't the most favored, unlike the star type whereby the sea serpent is being countered by star types, right, which is why star types are a bit better. So still a 7-star god in my opinion, but of course without the portraits her damage is kind of lacking, so comparing to the other 6 stars maybe not as good, but personally would rank her higher. Now next we have our star trio, the Voyager, 37 SLs regulars. For this 3, their main purpose is of course in the mains bulletin whereby sea serpent is being countered by this specific trio. I think this specific trio is used more than anything from what I can see, with 2 Fairy as the 4th unit in the boss rate itself. And Voyager and 37 mainly excels in Genesis damage, and I think they specifically, of course with the arrival of 37, made Genesis damage a bit more powerful than it should be. So this patch maybe is going to be super strong. Also for difficult contain Voyager's sturdiness is going to come in very clutch. And 37 in particular is our Genesis damage carry whereby there is follow-up attacks, and more importantly her damage can actually crit. Her Genesis damage can crit. The only problem with her at Portrait 0 is that the multipliers are really pitiful, but if you do get her to higher portraits, she's going to be an absolute god. So over here, tier 3 I think should be pretty fair, right? Now last of the trio we have Regulus, and Regulus really is super strong right now. And in fact, with the arrival of 2 Fairy, she has already been strong with her crit overflow, and not to mention now with the arrival of a lot of units that need more AP, her being AP generous is really one of the things that you want in a sub DPS or even as a main DPS, right? You can function the whole team, you can allocate more APs to other users while dealing high amounts of damage and having that crit overflow with 2 Fairy. So definitely one of the better options as compared to like Leah where she's strictly now support. It's quite pitiful, but Regular still excels in the current meta. And of course next we have Centurion, and Centurion now is kind of awkward. She used to be super good, but her stock seems to be keep dropping on a China tier list. Personally, I think maybe if you were to squeeze her to tier 2, end of tier 2, she might still make it. But of course our creator Pao Mihua over here did put her in tier 3, mainly because she is relying on RNG to deal single target DPS, and if you are to play her in the style whereby she doesn't use her ultimate at all to focus on single target DPS for boss rate, right, you are at the mercy of RNG. In the event that you don't get your single target card, your DPS is really lacking. So compared to Melania whereby her ultimate just ramps up slow, but still even at P0 outpaces Melania when it comes to single target DPS, which is a huge team in 1.4. Now moving up once again into tier 2, we are going to have Balloon Party at full portraits. Although I'm not sure why the creator wants to put Balloon Party at full portraits, because I think that Portrait 3 itself is already the main utility whereby the healing is being multiplied, is being increased. So I would consider it around the same. Full portraits, Portrait 3, you're going to have a lot of lost HP healing, and with everyone's health being so high, because everyone's units are invested now at level 60, you're going to heal a lot more with Balloon Party. So this is the reason why she's in tier 2 as compared to Medicine Pocket, which is borderline tier 3, and I think that this is somewhat reasonable, definitely. And next we're going to have 中毛鲨绿 or Charmaine over here. So for Charmaine, I feel like Charmaine might be a bit rated too high should be on the same tier as Beacon. If you want to rate Beacon on tier 3, you should rate Charmaine similarly, if not lower. But the reason why I would say so is because Charmaine at P0 is more as a sub DPS and also mainly as a debuffer, just like Beacon. A lot of people call him the Beacon counterpart, and I think that is true. Damage taken wise, the first skill also reduces 5% less than Beacon, so I don't know why Charmaine is rated that high. Maybe because Charmaine has more tankiness when it comes to being a 6-star unit. Maybe this is the reason why, but personally would rate Charmaine alongside Beacon. The only advantage that Charmaine have is that the ultimate would be a bit more on the DPS side because it kind of splashes AoE as well as having the ability to regain Muxi, but still I prefer the seal on Beacon. So yeah, I think this might be a bit highly rated. Next, moving on, we have Melania, and of course in a patch whereby boss rates are being introduced, Melania as a single target hyper carry is going to be ranked high, and I do think that at P0 this is a fair rating, although I do think that people overrate like the P2 effectiveness, especially in non-solo content. I think that if you're trying to solo with Melania, P2 is a lot better, but if you are trying to play in a team, I don't think the difference is that huge from a DPS standpoint. Regardless, Muxi control plus hyper carry DPS in 30 turns boss rates is just insane. Melania deservingly of this rank at tier 2. Now going from Melania to another boss rate carry, we have once again 37, but this time at Portrait 2. So you might be wondering what is the difference. You should be able to see on the screen the difference, and I think the main thing is that the multipliers are being increased. So like I mentioned, right, Portrait 0, the multipliers are quite low, and at P2 you not only get the increased multiplier, but you also get 20% free crit rate. That is quite significant in my opinion. So 37 is really a Portrait unit as compared to other units whereby P0 is usable. I think P0 is kind of weak, but with P2, maybe you can use her even when they do not emphasize on Genesis damage as much. Going next, we have A Knight, and A Knight being here, I'm not surprised, but I also think that maybe A Knight is a bit worse than Melania when it comes to boss rates. Maybe the reason why A Knight is better rated is because considering of Limbo as well as U2 content. Possibly because honestly a lot of people underrate A Knight a lot, but once you raise him to I3, you properly invest in his resonance, you are going to see that he does make a huge difference. Even if you were to hit an enemy above 50%, you're still going to see significant damage coming out from A Knight. And not to mention his afflictors not being countered by any of the afflictors outside of intellect means that he's very usable in all content. Extremely tanky, like I mentioned before, his HP is really off the charts, and not to also forget that he has that damage buff for the rest of the team if you were to kill an enemy. With the first kill itself, you're able to really accumulate a lot of Muxi, so you can spam ultimate from that angle also. So this is why A Knight is used so much. Even Sea Serpent, I've seen a lot of people triple S with A Knight, so definitely strong character at P0. Next, we are going to have Analyse. So Analyse as a support hasn't fell off that much compared to other units that at launch are good. So Analyse here, needless to say, Analyse is extremely strong because of her ability to raise the card levels. So she can pretty much just AFK while all of her rest of the teammates can use up the AP while she upgrades the card, and then you just use your shuffle mechanic to shuffle to one of the other cards that you need for DPS. And in fact, I would say she might be even higher if this season actually focuses on plant, but unfortunately it doesn't. And not to mention, the new character 6 kind of replaces her in the sense of a support that upgrades cards, so that's why her stock kind of dropped when 6 is being released. So next is going to be Druvis, and honestly, Druvis being here, right, I am also not surprised. And a lot of you guys might be thinking, hey, Druvis is useless, freaking hell, why is Druvis over here? And I would say that with the increase of the difficulty of the maps, right, people are starting to realize that DPS is not everything. In the start of the game at global launch, a lot of people say, well, this do more DPS, this do less DPS, so this is a worse unit. But a lot of people that have used Druvis will know the power of her controlling spells. But of course, right, with some of the maps or bosses having immunity to control, she does have her rank dropped a bit. But overall, I think in a lot of content, she's still being used, and especially in Limbo U2, whereby control is needed, much needed now, right? Given the difficulty, I think Druvis being tier 2, top of tier 2 is not a surprise at all. Now for our second last tier, tier 1, we are going to have Beacon Bloom on full portraits. Like I mentioned, right, Beacon at P0, the damage might be a bit lacking in the current ecosphere, but definitely at P5, right, the damage multiplier, if I'm not wrong, has been raised to 800% on P5 on her ultimate, as well as having the additional damage raised 15% each for each star. So that is pretty significant, and the problem with her being like quite fragile still is there, even though there is IF3, but I think that it is quite reasonable to put her in tier 1 because after all she is a 5-star unit, being this strong and relatively easy compared to having high portraits for 6-star, right? For 5-star is going to be easier. So definitely debuffer, sub DPS, DPS for boss rate, single target DPS, seal. She has everything, so we cannot deny her of this tier 1 rank. Now moving on from Beacon, we are going to have the new character, just came out not too long ago, 6. And for people wondering what 6 role is in this game, personally from what I've researched, I think that he's more suited as a support at P0 and at max is more suited as a carry. And the reason why is very simple, because there is a Eureka mechanic that is similar to 37. You can think of it as another resource that he has to accumulate. And at 5 Eurekas, for his second skill, he will be able to upgrade the card of a specific target, a teammate. So unlike Analyse, whereby she only upgrades her own card, you can specifically upgrade your allies cards, and also this provides them with clans and also gives them random buffs. It's a bit more RNG based. He's a debuffer buffer kind of a thing, but there is an assortment of debuffs and assortment of buffs that he can choose from. This is not really by choice, it's by RNG. So more RNG, but the fact that he can upgrade cards as well as purify is already super strong. So this is why 6 is up here in tier 1. Next, you're going to have Pickles. So Pickles honestly is a universal support that is extremely strong, especially in 4-man battles. So just like Necrologist, before the boss rate Necrologist wasn't really that much looked at. Pickles was already decent, but I think with the arrival of 4-man boss rates, Pickles really excel. The amount of damage buffs he can give to the 3 other teammates, including himself, is massive, and also he's very AP generous. So this is the main reason why I think Pickles is in tier 1 quite deservingly, definitely. But the only problem with global launch is that it's so close to other tier 0 units or tier 1 units as you would call it. So that is why a lot of people are choosing to skip Pickles the doggo. Next, we're going to go to A9, and at portrait 1 increases the damage of his ultimate. So when he is already strong, you make him even stronger with buffing his ultimate. So definitely we're going to see him a lot in future, and I think I've already mentioned why he's good. The same reasons he's good at, it's just that he's even stronger now with a damage boost. Now going into our 4 finalists for tier 1 over here, we have Black Dwarf. So in the environment whereby single target DPS is highly favored, Black Dwarf is really good and also directly counters map 2 boss rate. And not to mention that Black Dwarf also does very good AoE DPS, and also she's relatively tanky. So she kind of have everything that you want. She's like an enhanced Eternity of Sense. If you ask me whether there is power creep going on with this, I do think that there is a bit from here. She has a complex description, but if you research enough, I think she isn't that complicated, honestly. So very decent, especially for boss rates in 1.4. Now going into Melania P2, I think honestly, P2 Melania and P1 and P0 Melania not the biggest difference, but our creator over here did put P2 Melania this high and tier 1. I think that Melania deservingly should be in tier 1. Of course, with P2, definitely all the more reason because of the ability to ultimate so often. She's going to deal a lot more DPS, and everything about her is DPS. The Muxi control is good, but it's not a focus, I think, in patch 1.4. So this is why she's so strong over here. Next is Changling. So Changling, I would say that she is a god in Limbo U2. Okay, basically, you're going to see Limbo U2 every single season. So if you have Changling, you have a poison team, this is of course taking into consideration she's in the right team, you're going to excel because Limbo and U2 are like the fixed things that you have with each patch. So I think that is the reason why she's ranked so high. Personally, she wouldn't rank as high as for me because I do feel like other units can also clear content, and like boss rates units in 1.4 are a bit more higher ranked in my opinion. So similarly, Changling that is an AoE damage user should also be lower ranked because of the focus on single target DPS, and she really has no place in boss rates, to be honest. And finally, for our last tier 1 unit and the only undisputed god in reverse 1999 over here is Tooth Fairy. And the reason is very simple. If in previous patches she was considered good and godly already, now she is beyond godly because with the introduction of more 4-player content or 4-unit member content, Baby Tooth accumulates much faster, and the critical debuffs, like I mentioned, right, she makes every single carry want to build crit, almost every single carry want to do so. So also makes Leah bad in that sense. So this is the reason why she is so good. Healer is really mandatory in reverse 1999 1999, and also her healing for big numbers. So this is only one that can compare to Balloon Party in terms of healing, even when Balloon Party is healing low HP, and also the debuffs that she bring about can be better utilized in 4-man teams, and not to mention she is Star Afflictors, which is the counter for the most difficult Sea Serpent boss raids, because there are 3 boss raids and the most difficult one is the Sea Serpent one. So definitely you want 2 fairy, you need 2 fairy. Pretty much if you don't have 2 fairy, the game is becoming hard for you. As much as I like to say every single unit can clear the game, 2 fairy makes the game a lot easier in all sorts of content. Now going from the god to the god of gods, we also have the same character 2 fairy at Portrait 2, and for Portrait 2 in 4 unit battles pretty much just means that you are going to have 100% uptime on her debuffs, and you know that her debuffs are really good, so having a permanent uptime is straight up broken. Now moving on from the gods to the beyond godlike, we have the 3 Portrait 5 units, and here if you're a free to play player you can close it already, you never achieve this, but this is beyond broken, it's just well bait basically. Now let's first talk about 6. What 6 does at max portraits is, you just listen to the multipliers at max potential. If you have 6 negative debuffs, it's going to be 1450%. You hear me right? It's 1450%. Not to mention the activation requirement is being dropped by 33%. So you only need 66% of the stacks, i.e. at 4 stacks you can already unleash this if you have 6 negative status on the opponent, which is kind of easy to do if you have 6 plus another debuffer, because 6 himself is an extreme debuffer. The only problem I think with him is that 2 of his other cards, right, are not really DPS focused, but with that his Eureka gain, right, at full portraits is insane. Eureka usage is not the highest, so you can keep spamming ultimate even if his other cards are useless. He's an absolute DPS god. So just a screenshot for you guys for reference, 270k damage at max potential with Necrologist buff, A-Knight, etc, etc. Next we have another beast in Charmaine. Charmaine is really a beast in P5. At P0 compare him to Beacon. At P5 let's not joke anymore, he is the ultimate god because his critical rate becomes 100%, not to mention of the base, right? So he can overflow his crit rate on the main target, and all of this contributes to additional crit damage. With 2 fairy, you're going to have even more crit overflow, and also he has natural Muxi gain through the stacks that he have when he uses the ultimate. So this is insane. Basically just cycles. I've seen like every 3 or 4 consecutive turns using ultimate non-stop. And it even spills, right? It's not just a single target, it also spills to the additional unit. So I really think that this is what Will love to do, right? Just facial the whole content. So let's not talk about him anymore. Just insane DPS. And lastly, we have 37 at full portraits. So 37 at 0 portraits weak, 37 at 2 portraits slightly stronger, but full portraits insane. The multipliers have been raised up so high, and also the main thing I feel like is the Eureka gain. So for 6 itself, Eureka gain is used for activation, enhance stuff for the skills, but for 37 it's for her follow-up attack. So with the Eureka gain being so high, she's able to follow up attack constantly, and also the additional 100% multiplier, right, increases to 3 stacks if I'm not wrong, and for that itself this makes her damage really off the chart, and she hits AoE with her counter or her follow-up attack. So really broken. All 3 units, I wouldn't rank them separately. I think all 3 of them are ridiculous, to be very honest. And that pretty much sums up the analysis on this CN tier list made by Bao Mihua. Credits to Bao Mihua once again for making this tier list. Do let me know in the comment section below whether you guys like what you are seeing and what we are approaching in the future in Reverse 1999. Also, if you're interested in seeing what you can use as an alternative to pickles, definitely check out this video over here. I'll see you guys over there. This is Cocky Gachas, signing off.